All right, everyone. It looks like we're live here, Juan. Happy Monday, and I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Just Shilling. I hope that everyone is enjoying the holiday season. I'm very excited for this conversation with our special guest here, Juan, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his background and the genesis of how all this all began. But before we get into that, folks, just want to go over some quick ground rules. First and foremost, we will not do anything that is, or discuss anything rather, that is directly related to financial advice. The opinions that are shared here are of our own and respectively do not represent the organization that we work for. So without further ado, I'd like to get into it and introduce you all to Juan here. So Juan, hello, how are you?
Hello, Trevor. Happy Monday and a happy end of the year for you too. I'm doing
Yes,
very well.
it's been a very exciting year, and even in the last few days of the year, the industry that we work in, it's never a boring moment. Never a boring moment. Today's a very special day, and we'll touch on some of those topics later on. So, Juan, thank you for joining, and I'd like to kind of bring it back to the genesis of when this all began for you. So, take us back to when it all started.
So when did one start? When did I think you mean my journey onto blockchain.
Yes, your
That's
journey into
probably
blockchain.
so actually, I'm a sustainability person. I've been working in sustainability since before I worked in blockchain, and one day I just switched sides. I used to work in an NGO working on transparency disclosures, non-financial disclosures, reports on sustainability of companies.
Hmm.
One day we started doing some research with UCL, University College London, and that led to doing some research on blockchain for carbon markets, blockchain and sustainability. We started working together. I got more and more interested, and eventually I just switched sides. Right, I started working on blockchain in itself. I always had this sustainability bugging me, so I've continued to do work on blockchain sustainability for a number of years now. So back in the day, I was working at the University College London. I'm still affiliated with UCL. So I was a center administrator at the UCL Center for Blockchain Technologies. It was a very exciting stage, right? We were working on bringing industry and regulators and academia together. But then we wanted to go a bit more global, to
Hmm.
do more things. And with the team at the UCL Center for Blockchain, especially the founders, Paolo Tasca, um, and Nikhil Vadgama, they founded this foundation, the DLT Science Foundation, that is a global foundation now rebranding into Exponential Science. And I moved with them, became the chief of staff of the foundation. And it's been an incredible journey the past 2 years. We've done a lot of work in the field.
Fantastic. So, give us a little bit more context. Where are you based out of, and when did you start working for DLT Science Foundation?
Yeah, well, I'm based in London. This is where our HQ currently is. I'm
Mm.
not from London. You may have picked up on my accent. I'm originally from Argentina. In fact, I moved to London to work at UCL. We started working on the DLT Science Foundation around 2021 and got it set up in late 2022. Officially announced it in early 2023. So it's been almost 2 years of operations, say above radar. Um, we still have a good chunk of our team in London, but we have been, since the inception of the foundation, a global foundation. We've been working around and across many jurisdictions, and our team members are every day a bit more spread out around the world. I plan to stay in London for now. I really like it there, although it's a bit too cold right now. Um, but yes, that's more or less where we are, and since 2022, I would say.
Fantastic. So you've had a few years in the space, and I know that you've probably seen a lot. So, kind of bring us into your day to day. What's the day in the life like for Juan as the chief of staff? What does that entail?
Well, a chief of staff in general, what we have to do is a little bit of everything. It's a very exciting role because you need to be extremely up to date with absolutely everything. What our role is, our role is to translate the vision of the leadership
Mm.
into the specific tasks of each one of the team members. The bigger an organization is, um, the more disconnect there may be between the leadership
Yeah.
and the actual work. So we started very small. We started as a team of 5 people. We're around 55 right now.
Wow.
We're a massive team. So the whole process of transforming ourselves, that's something I had to be really in the middle of, like setting up the processes. And there is an element of knowing exactly what everyone is doing. And in a way, everybody knows more than you because everybody is working in their little area where they are a specialist. But you need to understand just enough to be able to speak their language and also help them work together with other teams and um, prevent, let's say, inertia. In an organization, when everybody's working on the little thing that interests them, sometimes we lose focus of our strategy. So my role is to bring it all together. The analogy sometimes it's like with the director of an orchestra, and I'm not trying to be pedantic here. It's just like we need to be all in synchrony here. So that's a part of it. But at the same time, I just can't like stand still, and I just like to do my research. So thanks to Paulo and Nikhil, our founders, they've allowed me to also continue and deepen lines of research that I'm very interested in, specifically like blockchain and sustainability. So that's carbon markets, that's Bitcoin mining with renewables, that's some policy engagement related to sustainability, like on MiCA. Um,
Mm.
I started wearing many hats because I didn't want to let go of that. And as an organization, we have a strong interest in engaging with regulators and producing research. So I split my time really. Basically,
Yeah.
whenever the organization lets me, in terms of time, I just dive into my research. I have a team right now. They're an amazing team. So we work together and sometimes it's a day of data collection. Sometimes we need to do some brainstorming. Sometimes we need to review literature that it's in fields that are entirely new to us, and we need to learn a lot and break our heads. But it's very exciting. It's never a dull day, just like in the industry. So it keeps you really, really stimulated.
And this is a great transition. It brings us to the next topic. And, I'm very curious to how you stay ahead and up to date with all of the changes that are going on. And let's kind of stick to blockchain overall when it comes to the regulatory landscape, right? And then you talked about that, and then we're obviously conversations about stable coins. So, how do you kind of manage it all? How do you kind of bring this all together and just not get disconnected and kind of, I would say, spread too thin, if you will?
Yeah, it's very generous of you to assume that I stay up to date with absolutely everything. I guess there's things that actually escape my grip. Honestly, I don't know a lot of things. There's a lot of things, implementation of specific national regulators of this and that you just don't know. So I think the way in which I approach it is it depends on what is the topic. Even within regulation, you compartmentalize it and you think of it in terms of your area of specialty and everything else. So the issue is with blockchain in general, with regulation in particular, it is so much going on
Yeah.
that it looks like it looks overwhelming and it feels overwhelming. It's just too much. You don't know where to start, um, but that's actually solvable. Not for everything, but within your area of expertise, if you dive really, really deep into one particular topic, you start building a mental map of, say, how regulation works in this field. So, for instance,
Yes.
one of the areas I'm most comfortable with is MiCA, and it's actually a part of MiCA related to white papers, to sustainability. I'm not that good with, say, licensing requirements specifically in the Czech Republic, right? But I do my best also to understand a bit of that. So I guess my strategy in these cases is to do a lot of research and dump it into, say, an article, a report, a scientific paper, and the process of doing that allows you to build a map of the regulation of the process of everything that is happening, and suddenly it's no longer disorganized, suddenly it's no longer overwhelming. So that works very well. But then there's everything else, right? You cannot become a specialized researcher in absolutely everything that's going on. So then you just need to um, try to absorb information from sources that are up to date, and also use this little area of specialty that becomes like your little fortress that allows you to understand everything around it, and to interpret everything else. um, so you start absorbing information from other people that are in fields closely connected to you. So one of the things I do is, honestly, I use LinkedIn a lot, and I follow thought leaders here and there.
Yeah.
And it's not just people posting generic things, right? It's people actually working in the industry, sharing the insights that they have, and it's incredible. Honestly, people say LinkedIn is not valuable. I couldn't be like more in disagreement, because for
Wow.
people
Yeah.
actually working in the industry, it's incredible. Same happens with X. And of course, I have my podcasts, right? I
Yeah.
have a series of podcasts. I don't go for a single run. When I want to go jogging, I always have my podcasts, one and another. And sometimes I listen to the same news thrice in three different podcasts, but I make sure I'm up to date with all of that.
I think that is very valuable information, Juan, especially for those that are trying to navigate into the space. We have people of all different levels, people that are newbies here, people that have been in the industry for quite some time, considered to be OGs, and there's never enough learning that could happen in this space, right? And I feel as if that through listening to it enough and researching and reading it enough, it somewhat kind of absorbs in your brain through osmosis. So we are talking about MiCA, and I wanted just to kind of hear your thoughts on kind of the state of the union with MiCA, and there's also something called MiCAR, right? Correct. So can you help me understand the difference between those?
Well, there is actually no difference. It's just that
Ah,
we can't manage to come up with a single nomenclature, let's say. So MiCA stands for Markets in Crypto Assets. Some people call it MiCA. I think now we in the MiCA team are winning. We prefer this pronunciation, but there's actually no official pronunciation. Um, and MiCAR, or my car, would be Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. So you could call it the MiCA regulation or MiCAR. It is just the same. In terms of state of the art, or what is what's going on right now? You said there's never a dull day. Actually, today is a very, very special
today
day.
is a very special day. So elaborate a little bit more on that. I was going to wait, but because it is the 30th of December, talk to us a little bit about the significance of this day and what the impact is going to be.
Yeah, there's so much. Let me summarize it just at
Yeah.
the beginning. MiCA is coming into force, right? It is today. Today is the day. Some aspects of this regulation have come into force before in June. For instance, some regulations on stablecoins, what we call e-money tokens. Some will come into force in practice later, because there are some transitional regimes for some coins, for some players. But overall, the day in which the majority of the requirements of MiCA are kicking in is today.
Mm.
So, for instance, today a lot of people are looking very, very closely um, to exchanges, and they are wondering, are they going to delist USDT, or are they not going to delist USDT? Well, today is a day to do that. Maybe it can also be later, but today is an important day to answer this question. um, it's also a bit strange how we have come to this day, because, well, why is MiCA very, very important in the world stage? Is because it's a regulatory regime that is very comprehensive, but it is so comprehensive that sometimes it's a bit too comprehensive, and not even the regulators comprehend it. So what we were expecting to have is, so there is what you call the regulation, and then there is the implementation of the regulation,
Yes, yes,
practical
yes.
level. That's what we call the regulatory technical standards. We were expecting to have all of the regulatory technical standards nice and ready way before today. That has not happened. So there's a number of requirements that legally exist, but that we
Mm,
don't exactly know how to comply with them. So it is not the clear cut date that we initially thought it would be. We need to see, wait and see also over the coming months how new technical standards come and keep coming progressively. And these requirements will be kicking in as a bit more of a step function rather than a discrete moment with and without MiCA.
yeah. And when it comes to that, let's talk a little bit about stable coins. And, they are central to, I believe, this ecosystem overall, right? And what's your take when it comes to stablecoin regulations? And do you think that there are, significant safeguards that are currently in the market without kind of fostering the innovation? And what are your thoughts on, Tether and maybe the potential impacts on the market? And could there just be someone else to kind of step into that void, like a, USDC or RLUSD?
Yeah. So first of all, I agree that stablecoins are extremely important. They are the use case in blockchain for many right now. The first time, when we ask about real world use cases, right? Sometimes
Yes.
we go too much into the industrial processes and how we can introduce tokens in the supply chain and so on. But this is a very clear real world use case. It's
Yeah.
payments, especially since Bitcoin has become a bit more of a wholesale system than a retail system. There was a gap for retail payments, and stablecoins have come and filled this gap really, really well. And I also think this is going to be the year for stablecoins. I think globally, a time of slightly more unfriendly regulatory time is coming to an end. So I think this might be the year of stablecoin on ramp and off ramp facilitation, and with that, a lot of use and value is going to come out of that. Um, but then there's the question on safeguards, um, and I'm always in favor of information. I think that this is an industry that is its identity comes also from sometimes exploring the unregulated and creating value and completely different logics of interacting with one another without the need for a regulated system. But as
Yeah.
we integrate with more traditional systems that are regulated, that regulation becomes needed. Um, so how do you strike the balance between like over regulating and preventing not over regulating and preventing a wild west? I think often the balance comes on the side of information.
Yeah.
So if you require stablecoin players sometimes to reveal some information, to provide attestations of reserves, etc., that is probably positive from the point of view of the consumer. Not entirely, and not always. So one of my colleagues, Walter Hernandez, actually has a paper showing how sometimes too much transparency is actually bad for stablecoins because price becomes a bit too volatile in reaction to any little change in reserves, even though like the overall say reserve strategy is sound. uh, but with that qualification, information is a good thing. Now the issue is that consumer protection in MiCA, for instance, is not just protection in terms of information. So there's the MiCA white papers, for instance. These are great documents for the consumers to understand, or the retail investors to understand what product they are buying, and that's very useful. But there's other requirements. There's the obtention of a license, and there is a segregation of reserves. So this is something that is actually causing some trouble for Tether. So a stablecoin issuer needs to have reserves in a certain kind of assets, right? Under MiCA, and if Tether were to comply, they would need to probably to relinquish a bit of the freedom onto what assets they are investing in, and also the fact
Mm.
that they need to reveal it. While on the one hand, that's beneficial to the consumer that knows what is backing what they're buying. It also is revealing the competitive advantage that is pushing Tether forward. But then on the other hand, we have the fact that these reserves, they need to be on a bank, and this bank, it needs to be in the EU, which for some is not a problem, right? So Circle has just come in and said, sure. So for the European market, I'm going to be serving the consumers with stablecoins that have their reserves in these banks. They are regulated within the EU. Here it is. But now imagine if you extended this logic to every single jurisdiction on Earth, right? You had the reserves in the EU, the reserves in the US, then in the UAE, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and the whole thing starts breaking down. And one of the actually of the key things that blockchain brought about was a global market where we can
Yes.
actually take advantage of these network effects. The fact that we have instant settlement around the world in a matter of seconds that the banking system had never been able to achieve, that's actually a result of us having just one single global economy. So there are some effects on innovation. And for instance, that are saying that's probably too much for us. We're not going to be doing that for now. We'll see which one of these strategies triumphs, or maybe both of them do, and they have their niche and their relevant market.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of FUD either way that you go with this topic. And, one of the other things that I was just kind of thinking about, Juan, is could MiCA compliance be something that is just kind of cost prohibitive to certain players? I mean, do you have any insights, or has your research led you to be able to share, just the cost associated with an organization becoming compliant under these new regulations?
Yeah, it can be very costly. I think MiCA lacks a sense of proportionality
Mm,
with the size of the organization. It can be quite costly. Probably not particularly so for the largest organizations. Um, I've heard to put some numbers in here and just take this with a grain of salt. But I've heard, like, say a law firm will charge you around 400K to make you MiCA compliant, right? And that will be like 200 in licensing and 200 in white papers and these sort of things. This is ballpark and can be completely off, but it gives you an idea. Now, that's not
yeah.
such a huge number for the largest players, but at the same time, for a project that is just launching, it can be a really big amount, and you don't even know if it's worth it, right? So what MiCA does is, to a great extent, it regulates the conditions under which you can be listed in a European exchange. So that creates some sort of scaling problem, because if you want to probably achieve enough revenue, and you want your token to, say, appreciate enough so that the treasury of the foundation that is stewarding and steering the crypto project is sufficiently wealthy to pay for all this stuff, you need to be
Mhm.
listed in the first place. But to be listed in the first place, you need to pay for all of this. And how do you break, like, there's a chicken and egg situation that is not that easy to break. Now, of course, MiCA has some provisions of proportionality, right? It does say, well, do this on a best effort basis.
Okay, yeah.
Fine. But that's not like super clear, and you still have a lot of the specific requirements. And in fact, to a large extent, actually, the new players, the new entrants in the market, have more requirements than the incumbents. So there are these transitional regimes, some things also called the grandfathering clauses, and these are all systems that give existing players 18 months or 3 years to adapt to the MiCA requirements. And you can say, well, this is reasonable, right? Because the new entrants, they can just start from scratch and
Yeah.
design all of their processes, their research strategy, their licensing strategy, everything. They need time to adapt to the new regulatory regime. Yeah, fair enough. But at the same time, the existing players, the incumbents, probably have a larger treasury. So you are imposing a larger monetary, say, a responsibility on new entrants that maybe want to challenge the existing players, and they don't have any transitional regime. So that is a tough situation. It also depends to an extent on implementation. And that implementation strategy will be seen also in the regulatory technical standards and in the members of the EU, the countries, the specific states, Germany, France, Spain. We need to see exactly how they implement some of these requirements. So to an extent, it's an open question, but the tension is there, and there is a feeling that the requirements may be a bit too heavy on the smaller players.
Yeah. I mean, kind of switching gears to our sides rather to, kind of what's happening here in the States. I think that a lot of us see, well, at least you have some kind of framework that you can go off of instead of complete ambiguity, right? So as you mentioned before, there's always going to be pros and cons with this one. And I want to switch gears a little bit and, kind of talk a little bit more about some of the biggest challenges that are kind of, I would say, facing real world or blockchain adoption rather today for organizations, and how does your organization kind of help bridge the gap between innovation and what we're talking about when it comes to real world implementation?
Yeah. So we have this question now. Blockchain has been around for a while. Why isn't the whole world tokenized already? Why is
Yeah.
this? It's a bit of an unfair question. I think we've done pretty well. But at the same time, like we look at AI, and AI has achieved so much in such a
Such a
short
short amount
period,
of time. Yeah.
apparently, right? Because actually AI has been here for a very long time as well, but in a more incipient mode. And one day it hit some sort of critical mass point, and things started changing. But it's not like the AI started 2 years ago. But that's where the question is coming from. Um, and while I do think we are doing pretty well and adoption is increasing, I do, and we do see some challenges on adoption. Part of it is awareness,
Yeah.
awareness of what the technology is on the side of industry, like how it could be implemented, and that is actually solved by education, right? And we're talking education um, for the entrepreneurs, education for the businessmen, but also education for the workforce that's coming out of university and the developers. And there is education of the regulator itself. So, bringing about awareness of blockchain technology is still an ongoing task. There is the challenge of also explaining it's not just crypto. It's not just meme coins, which are great, by the way. I think they're really cool, but also probably for a while it's been difficult to also propose that, let's say, that value add because of another challenge, which is regulation.
Yeah.
So for a while, and there's obviously the case of the US with the SEC that is now coming to an end, but things have been a bit unfriendly towards crypto. There's the Gensler era and everything that has happened, in particular since Terra Luna and FTX. But there was also some unfriendliness before, right? Crypto is for criminals. Crypto is burning the planet, and then crypto is for criminals again, I suppose. But white collar criminals this time. I think that's coming to an end. But also, probably the industrial, say, applications of blockchain technology beyond crypto.
Yeah.
The usage of tokens that have a utility and a function in governance that are not just pure speculation, that are meme coins, were actually at a disadvantage before, because say if you issued a token with some of these functionalities, you might be in the US, for instance, be attacked because you're issuing a security without having authorization.
Yeah.
uh, if you wanted to do a more serious real world project, you would need access to the banking system and you would be debanked. But if you try to launch a meme coin, no connection, say, to the industrial system, no other utility of the token, actually you were in a safer position. So regulation is actually a factor also in the awareness of what we can do. And then there's a regulation in itself. So what we're trying to do is improve awareness via education, and then improve regulation itself via education of the regulator, but also trying to contribute to the regulations itself. So a few years ago, for instance, we even contributed to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, their consultation on the environmental impact of crypto. Right, it was a time. Right now, the environmental credentials of crypto are much better than they used to be a few years ago. Uh,
Yes.
that not something we can take for granted. That didn't used to be the case, and our contribution to that consultation that ended in that White House report was actually, I think, a value add. And we continue to do that, of course, in the EU a lot. Within the UK, which is where we are based. So we try to also contribute to the rulemaking process. And then there's one more thing, I think, is the challenge of going from a pilot to an actual commercially viable product. And I've seen a number of cases of products that are really great. They are at the pilot stage and they perform really well. Clients maybe even try it and they say, we love this, but the pilot is subsidized. And one day, maybe subsidy runs out and people say, okay, now it's time to start paying for this product that you've been getting for free in pilot stage for a while.
Yeah.
And parties say, oh, you know what, we're fine with things as they are. Thank you for the cherry on top for the past few months, but we don't really want this. We're not willing to pay more. So there is a gap there to bridge between um, proving that something is technically feasible and actually achieving scaling and commercialization. That's a very hard question. That's not something somebody can provide a one size fits all answer, because that's, in a way, that's for the market to discover.
Yeah.
um, we are trying to contribute to that process as well, with some grants, with some investments, with some consulting. um, but overall, it's the main challenge that we have in the longer run. So that's not something I can answer by myself. It's probably for the many
That's
entrepreneurs.
that's an entire another podcast plus more. So can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the partnerships or the organizations that you worked with? Some that come to mind that folks may not be aware of. Some big names. Ripple comes to mind. Hedera. Um, just talk a little bit about some of the organizations that you have partnerships with, and what's it like, kind of forming those relationships.
Yeah. So you hitting the nail on its head with the names that you're mentioning there. Two of the main partners that we work with are Hedera and Ripple, for instance. Right, Hedera has been a donor of the DLT Science Foundation, um, and they've allowed us to work in the way in which we want to also contribute to the ecosystem. And that is, there's so many, say, ecosystem foundations out there in all these crypto projects whose
Yeah.
job is to promote that particular crypto project. And that is a very necessary thing. That's a role to play there. But at the same time, there's a space for, say, the blockchain agnostic work, which is what the scientists do. So the fact that we try to play that role, that allows us to be also in a special position, that allows us to produce more authoritative scientific research that is then useful for the crypto ecosystem at large and our partners in particular. Um, and it also allows us to speak with regulators and with policymakers from a completely different point of view, because we are not, say, a direct representatives of the industry, right? We're not like coming like a lawyer on behalf of my client. We are actually trying to bridge gaps and educate both sides of the aisle. So
Yes.
that's very nice. Ripple has also been great to work with. In fact, we used to be working. Well, the team of the Digital Science Foundation has a background at the UCL Center for Blockchain Technologies, where we have worked with Hedera and with Ripple before. Um, and there's so many other relationships that we had built at UCL as well. Then Ripple is actually supporting a key initiative that we're launching right now, which is the UK Center for Blockchain Technologies. It's a center that is actually bringing together a series of universities, including, for instance, Oxford,
Yes.
Birmingham, at UCL. So at UCL, we've also worked with also specific initiatives of many projects. We've worked with Corda, with Stellar, with I think it was for the Algorand Centers of Excellence initiative. We really try to work across the aisle. I think there's a lot of relationship forming over time, um, and it's a very different kind of relationship that you need to build, because it's not the kind of people that you meet in a crypto conference and you give them a pitch. You say, hey, would you like to invest in my product? It's like,
Yeah.
no, actually, you call me and say, look, we've been doing some research on your project. Would you be interested in like reviewing our papers? Because
Yeah.
we actually have some questions for you. And then you start building a relationship, and they realize that your work is good and that it could be valuable for them. And the same happens with a regulator, right?
Do they feel? Do you think that they feel a bit apprehensive at first when you kind of make these approaches, or are they pretty open to the critiques and the research that has been done?
I think I actually should say that the crypto industry is quite open to all of this. Surprisingly so, probably. Um, we've done so many, say, industry exchange programs. Um, you know, Companies and foundations and organizations that maybe steer a blockchain project, they're actually complex groups of people, and in these groups of people sometimes you find people that are completely uninterested in what you're doing, but sometimes you find just that one group of people that is actually very interested and that sees a value on it.
Yeah.
um, and I would say that in the majority of the projects that we've interfaced with, we have found this sort of attitude, not just in the crypto projects, also with exchanges and so on. There's always that group of people within the organization that is interested in the scientific approach.
Hmm. Now, this brings me to my next question, and this is more related to what excites you about blockchain's potential to disrupt industries really kind of outside of finance. And some that kind of come to mind for me are, supply chain, healthcare, renewable energy, things that people typically aren't talking about, but there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. So could you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, I so in some of these cases, I would say I have some sort of restrained enthusiasm, and sometimes I have a massive unrestrained enthusiasm. So one of the issues I have is with supply chains, right? So supply chains are very complex, and they're also very analog and stuck in time. And there's just so much opportunity to implement blockchain in supply chains. There is a so one of the things also about education and awareness is telling people what blockchain is useful for, but also telling them when blockchain is not needed, right? So the question is
Yeah.
like, what is a rule of a thumb for when you need and when you don't need blockchain? And that question may come from, maybe answered with a simple question like, is there a trust issue between participants in the
Yes.
system?
Yeah.
So if there isn't, then you're probably not using the right technology. If there is, then you probably are. So in supply chains, you could say, well, this is a great case because clearly there is distrust between participants. Somebody in the United States and somebody in Myanmar that are in the same supply chain have no relationship with them with each other. There's no reason why there would be a trust in the first place. But at the same time, it is such a complex system, that is not clear to me that we can actually create a digital map of entire supply chains. So I see a lot of potential, but I have say I have, say, the handbrake on sometimes when I think about this. You mentioned, I think, also healthcare. So healthcare is
Yeah.
it's also supply chains, right? So healthcare supply chains. Now, in this case, I think the value proposition is more on a particular part of supply chain management, that is provenance demonstration. I think authenticity demonstration in particular is a very important value add in healthcare supply chains, and it's a bit more limited in scope than just supply chains in general. I think that would be super important. And I think, well, authenticity in general is a theme of blockchain. It's something that it can contribute to a lot of sectors, and that's something in healthcare that is going to be very useful. Then there's the issue of digital identity. Um,
Yes.
there's an issue of privacy and data sharing at the same time in healthcare, where blockchain could be a really great technology. So how do we share our medical records without actually revealing more information that we want to? Blockchain seems perfect for that. Now, that's the enthusiasm part. The restraint is a bit on, well, is that the direction that we're going in? Because I'm from Argentina. Recently in Argentina, they enacted digital medical records that are centralized in a single government database. And I was like, come on, guys, we've been working on this technology. And they, so that's a problem. But then you also mentioned renewable energy, and that's the area of my uncapped enthusiasm. Um, I just feel that there is a natural correspondence between blockchain and renewable energy. There's just so many dimensions in which these two technologies work so well together. There's specifically this subset of renewable energy that is what we call variable renewable energy,
Yeah.
solar, wind, and they have these problems of intermittency, right? That sometimes you have a lot of wind and sun, and sometimes you don't, and that these supply patterns don't match the demand patterns. So what you would need to have a flexible, to have a stable and robust electricity grid is to have a flexible demand that can turn on when there's a lot of energy and that can turn off when there isn't. That's actually quite hard to achieve the more renewable energy you want to have, right? Like once you are over the 20% of renewable energy, variable renewable energy in a grid, you start hitting these issues. And this is not an issue that we used to have, because typically, when you turn the air conditioning at your place, to put it very bluntly, somebody would shove more coal into an engine somebody else,
Yeah.
right? And get more electricity. This is a bad analogy, but that's what we call load following, right? The supply would match the demand. Now we need to do it the other way around. And what industry is going to be willing to turn off just because the electricity grid needs it, right? Like we're having a podcast right now. What if there's not a lot of electricity? Should we turn off our laptops and wait until later? Like lots of industries, they cannot do that. But for instance, Bitcoin mining is actually very flexible in terms of electricity consumption. It's both technically able and economically incentivized to do it. So I think that's super exciting. But
Yeah.
then there's
And
other
I
aspects.
want to cut you off because, that brings me to the next question. And I know that you've done a lot of research on Bitcoin mining and the environmental impact of it. And there's a lot of misconceptions, I think. We've kind of always heard that Bitcoin mining is terrible and that there's no actual benefit from that. And I was looking into something that you wrote and that you mentioned that without Bitcoin mining, it could actually do a disservice, right? So can you talk a little bit about what your research what you found in your research and kind of inform us on the conversation when it comes to kind of energy consumption within the blockchain space?
Yeah. So, well, the fact that Bitcoin has value or does not have any value it exceeds energy research in itself, right? If you think Bitcoin is absolutely useless, then you will think that everything that I'm just about to say now is irrelevant, right? So what I'm going to say is, look, you can turn on the Bitcoin miners when there's a lot of renewable electricity, and turn them off when there isn't, and that's actually a good thing. But if you don't think Bitcoin mining has any value, you might just have an army of blow dryers in the forest that you turn on and off, following the same logic, and it adds no value. So, but assuming Bitcoin has some value, and I definitely think it does, then the story completely changes. So, because we're saying once you hit this threshold, say 20% of variable renewable electricity in your grid, you start hitting these problems of intermittency. This actually impacts the profitability of the renewable sector, and it makes them less likely to grow. So when you will have periods when there is too much electricity, and that means the electricity prices are going to be very low, or they're going to be zero, or they're even going to be negative. You
Mm.
have to pay people to take your electricity. That is very bad for your ROI. That is very bad for you to recover the investment. And that's a huge problem, because if you cannot recover your investments, you are not going to build your next wind park, nor your next solar farm. So if you manage to find a source of of electricity demand that is flexible and willing to take it when it's very cheap, and willing to stop taking it when it's expensive, then you have probably solved that issue. And that's exactly what Bitcoin mining can do, because it is not just technically able to turn off and on a miner. It's technically possible to do it at a moment's notice, but at the same time, there's an economic incentive to be responsive to prices, because electricity prices are the main input in a Bitcoin miner's economic equation, together with the Bitcoin price. Um, so that is really contributing to having more what we call renewable penetration. So
Yes.
Bitcoin mining can introduce more renewable penetration. Now, this doesn't mean Bitcoin does not consume a lot of electricity. It does, right? And some people use the concept of a carbon debt that every industry goes through, where initially you may have your electricity consumption grows, and because your industry is going so exponentially, you don't care what electricity sources you are using, and that means you are very carbon positive, which is a bad thing. But as the industry matures and you start being more and more sensitive to the electricity prices, as the Bitcoin price cannot go up exponentially forever, but it starts going more like logarithmic and being a bit more stable, you start being much more sensitive to electricity prices. And these complementarities that we see are going to be becoming more and more relevant. And that is what we are seeing. And that is a tendency, a trend that we think is going to accentuate in the coming years. So it's going to be really, really exciting to see how data centers, mainly Bitcoin miners, also maybe AI data centers, can actually contribute to a more renewable energy grid.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think that a lot of people understand the amount of energy that we're going to need to accomplish all the things that come along with the advancements in AI. It's kind of this elephant in the room that no one speaks about, but everyone talks about Bitcoin mining. Can we think a little bit or talk a little bit about, the role that tokenization is going to kind of play in transforming maybe the way that we invest in renewable energy and carbon credits, and what else do you kind of see of or think of when it comes to kind of practical steps needed to make that a reality?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I was too focused on the mining side of things. That really excites me, but the tokenization side of thing is another.
Yeah.
So, what is a token? First, like a token is a digital representation of something. Well, it doesn't even need to be digital, but it's a representation of something, right? In blockchain, it's a blockchain-based representation of something else. So, what is this something else? It can be a lot of things. It can be, for instance, renewable energy certificates. So that's actually, technically, we call them environmental attributes. In some countries, they're called RECs. In some countries, they're called GOs, guarantees of origin. But these energy certificates, they are the certificate that demonstrate that you have generated the electricity with a renewable source.
Mm.
And there's a problem with electricity grids, and that is that all of the electrons, say, go into the same cables, into the same power lines, And you cannot really discriminate saying, okay, this electron came from a renewable source, I'm going to buy this one, and this one didn't, so I'm going to send it to that consumer. You cannot do that. So the way energy markets work is through a fiction. You have two markets, actually. You have the electricity market, like the technical power lines, and then you have a fictional market where when you generate electricity, you get the certificate if you did it with renewable sources. And if you want to buy the renewable electricity, you buy this certificate. And although you don't really know which electrons came to you, you are economically, by buying a renewable certificate, you're incentivizing renewable generation. So economically, you are buying the renewable electricity. But this creates a lot of implementation problems, and
Yeah.
sometimes even some absurd situations, right? Because imagine an electricity grid that has a lot of renewable electricity during the summer, but not during the winter. And during the winter, a lot of people go about and they just buy the renewable electricity certificates. And they say, "Oh, I've got bought all of these renewable electricity." Well, the issue is, no, you haven't, right? And no matter the economic effect here, you literally have not. It's not that it's not provable. You just haven't done it. So actually having a token that contains or represents the renewable energy certificate allows you to actually build in some fractionalization, also
Yes.
time of the certificates. It allows you also to commercialize the certificates in better ways, in more efficient ways. So that's really interesting. And then you can also uh, work on the other side of the market. So just like you can tokenize the renewable certificates, you can also tokenize the emissions. So every time you emit carbon,
Yes.
somebody attests that gets into a token, and then you have a blockchain-based account of, say, your carbon debt. And then if you know what is your debt, then you know what your financing needs to be. So you work on both sides. And then there's tokenization can also be used for electricity trading. So there's a lot of applications of tokens in this market.
So many. And this is kind of making me think of some other things that I was doing research on, gosh, years ago. And it's funny that, everything's coming to fruition. And, I mean, we can have an entire another podcast about smart cities and optimization and things like that. But, we were talking a little bit about AI, and how do you envision AI and AI agents really kind of transforming blockchain and then opening up the conversation for things like smart cities and just a more optimized use of resources and blockchain in general?
Wow. So the interaction of blockchain and AI, small question.
Mhm.
Well, the issue is they are such broad technologies. The universe of ways in which they can interact is really massive.
What are some
Uh,
ways that you think that are kind of that you're most interested in?
well, you mentioned agents, and I think that one is actually very, very exciting, very cool. So agents are going to be, say, these AI constructs that are able to prepare plans and execute these plans according to what you want, so that you don't need to tell them exactly every step that you need to do. These agents may also be combined. It may not just be virtual. You could have robotic agents, right? Like agents that go somewhere for you and they buy something for you. But then you have the problem of, well, how do the agents access the banking system, right? How does an agent um, make a bank transfer, and what
Yeah.
is the legal entity here? Do you create like a limited liability company, and it's like you need to have a person that owns it. It's a complicated thing. Well, you could also give the agent a crypto wallet. You could help it interact via smart contracts. So the interaction of agents with crypto, again, as a simple payments technology,
Yeah.
that is just fantastic, right? Of course, the other thing that is always a theme is authenticity, right? The way in which I see it, AI is a technology that allows us to generate synthetic data. Um, so when you are generating synthetic data, you also have a problem of authenticity. So there's a lot of convergence that is possible here. How do you assure that an AI model has been trained on a given data set. What are the parameters? Well, there's these projects like Prove AI, and these decentralized AI projects that allow you to verify um, how a model was trained. Or, for instance, you could use blockchain to distinguish what you would say like deep fakes from certified images. So there's a lot of interaction between AI and blockchain with the authenticity that blockchain can provide. But the other aspect that I just like and it really excites me is simple. Blockchain as a payments technology can actually be
Yes.
for AI. There's one more thing. I mean, you could also see it in the other way around. You could see, well, how can AI impact blockchain? Um, so again, so many possibilities. Probably one of them could be maybe fraud detection in the crypto market, right? You could have AI algorithms, machine learning processes, and agents detecting patterns of scams, and maybe that is going to help us build a more trustworthy and truthful ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was reading something too about, lending, right, with banking and AI agents kind of taking over that process. But then that opens up another can of worms about, who's creating the AI and could it be bias and things like that. So, we can go on and on and on, but I do want to be cognizant of the time. We're almost out of time here. And there are a couple more topics that I did want to cover. So, there's been a lot of chatter about quantum computing lately, and we all are probably aware of Google's, Willow, right? So talk a little bit about maybe some of the research that you've been doing or your organization has been doing, and how are you and your team kind of preparing for this new kind of quantum leap, if you will, no pun intended.
Well, I actually hadn't thought of that. I have to say, quantum technology is not my area of focus, but it does come up also in our educational programs as well. And there's some of our team members that are working on that. When we explain to students how blockchain works, we talk about this asymmetric cryptography, right? We tell them, well, Bitcoin is not encrypted. It uses cryptography, but it's not encrypted. And the difference between one and the other concept is that in one case, if you have the key, you can decode the message that you have encrypted, and in the other you cannot. And that's because you use this cryptography technique in Bitcoin. For instance, it's called elliptic curve. uh,
Yes, yes.
it's a very strange thing. It's like to wrap your head around. It's like you are multiplying a number, which would be like the private key, by a point in a plane, by a set of coordinates. So you're multiplying a one-dimensional construct by a two-dimensional construct.
Yeah.
That allows you to come up with a new number, a new value that nobody else can um, deconstruct unless they originally know this value, this private key, or they have a quintillion years to keep trying. And then what quantum computing can do is actually theoretically it could break that, right? It could allow you to um, to break the system and actually do it much more quickly. So that's not an unsolvable problem. So not all of the forms of cryptography are vulnerable to quantum computing. There's quantum proof cryptography. There's like what you call the real thing and the stopgap solution in quantum proof cryptography. Basically, the easy solution is you just encrypt things many times, like you wrap it over and over. So that
Yeah.
even if a quantum computer is harder, if you want to do things properly, you actually need to use a different algorithm that is more resistant to that. It will create some problems, though, to change the technology. That say, if it's needed to change the algorithm in Bitcoin, well, if it's an existential threat, which right now it is still not, it could be done, but it would probably really hurt the Lightning Network, which depends on the elliptic curve system. So um, there is there is a series of problems there. One of the things that we are working on are related to private keys. So this is not me personally, but this is a part of our team and part of our grantees. So just like you can use quantum computing theoretically to break, say, the Bitcoin asymmetric cryptography, you could use that for 51% attacks or double
Yeah.
spending attacks. You could also use that to decode private keys. And if you do that, well, obviously that's a problem. So you will need to change your keys and also establish more sophisticated key management systems. One of the initiatives that we're working on together with a number of our partners is what we call the DREC Alliance, which stands for Decentralized Recovery Alliance. The technical innovation behind this alliance is the work of some of our grantees, and it's really, really, really state of the art. It's really exciting, and it is part of the technology that you could use in the future to have more safe keys. It's not entirely the goal of this is not just to be quantum resistant, but it can be applied for that. So I think there's hope. We don't even know if quantum computing is going to get us to this critical stage. So I wouldn't say we're doing a whole lot ourselves, but some people are, and we're
Yeah.
doing our little thing.
Yeah, I think that, the entire ecosystem, people are thinking about it, and then, we don't even have time to get into, DAGs or hash graphs and kind of how that would even make this even more complex. But, Juan, this has been an incredible conversation. I just looked at the time and we are over, my friends. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully our audience has learned a lot. I'd like to kind of close this out here. And how can people that are maybe interested in just following your work or learning more about your organization, about your initiatives? I don't know if you guys are hiring or looking for internships. Like, what can people do after this conversation to stay more informed about not only what you're doing and the great work that you're trying to achieve, but your organization as well?
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. We actually are hiring. We're always interested in getting new team members, even unsolicited applications. So I would just stay up to date with our website. As I said, we are rebranding from DLT Science Foundation to Exponential Science. So exponentialscience.org is a great website to get started. There's also websites for our specific initiatives like the MiCA Crypto Alliance, which is micacryptoalliance.org.com, DLT Earth, and just follow me on LinkedIn, Juan Ignacio Ibañez. I can send you a series of links after the show so that you can put them in a LinkedIn post. So
Yes, yes, I
if you
love
follow
that.
Trevor, just look for Trevor's next post, and I'll give you all the resources there.
Yes, I'm definitely going to do a recap post. But once again, Juan, thank you so, so much. This has been extremely, insightful. Thank you for your time, and thank everyone for joining us. I know that this is a very busy time of the year. I hope that everyone is safe and able to enjoy the holiday season. And until next time, folks, Happy New Year. Take care, Juan. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right.